Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the CoreNet Cafe. I'm Erin Michael with Capital One and the current president of the chapter. Today, we have a very special guest, Herman Bulls, the vice chairman of the Americas with JLL and the founder of JLL's highly acclaimed public institutions group that specializes in delivering real estate solutions for state, local, and federal governments. During Herman's 31 years at JLL, he served in multiple areas, including development, investment management, facilities operations, and business development. Prior to joining JLL, Herman completed almost 12 years of active duty service with the United States Army, including assignments at the Pentagon and West Point. Herman received a degree in engineering from West Point, and he serves on several public, private, and not-for-profit boards. And he recently joined the board of directors at Host Hotels and Resorts. Herman, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Oh, well, Erin, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that very kind introduction.
Of course. You know, I just want to jump right in. Selfishly, I wish we had more than 30 minutes. You've had such an impressive background with West Point and Harvard. You have an MBA from Harvard with active duty service as well. Tell me, what drew you to real estate and what kept you here for so long?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. And actually, it's related to Harvard, to tell you the truth. I attended Harvard as a junior Army officer. The Army sponsored me to go there in preparation for teaching at West Point. And I didn't know anything about the process. And I got there and I found out, hey, they have this thing called section president. And people about 2 weeks or week and a half into it, you have people get up, you make speeches, and people pick the leaders for their section. So you have the president, the social secretary, the education secretary, but the president obviously is the big one. And I've always been involved in student government, somewhat of a leader. And Erin, I tell you, I said, okay, I think I'll do this. And the advantage probably I had, having been in the military and, had over 200 people working for me at the time, giving speeches was not a big issue. Some of my colleagues were looking at the floor, looking at their notes or whatever. I can tell you, I got up and it really was kind of a drop the mic moment. And I just had about 2 or 3 things written on a card. Long story short, I was selected as my section's president. Now, this is what happens next. There was a real estate course at Harvard that back in the 80s, everybody, before the tax laws, everybody, no matter what you're gonna do, you invested in real estate. So you want to take this real estate course. They only had one professor, Professor Porvu, and you would have thought that the world was coming to an end. These MBA students rebelled. And of course, I'm on student government, and I was involved in the group that negotiated with the administration to get a new professor. And the new professor, by the way, we got was Don Brown, one of the founders of JBG right here in Washington. That's how I met John initially. And after that, we got to section. I decided to take the course. So I took the course and I saw that it was kind of I was a finance concentrator, and I saw that this real estate stuff brought the people portion into it, and I went into real estate. Fast forward, went to West Point, taught, and put together my first deal while I was teaching at West Point. By the way, which failed. Harvard did a case on it as well. It was a land deal in 1986. And those of you old enough to know that was a big, big recession time. But I just fell in love with real estate, left West Point, went to the Pentagon, and I decided there were 3 industries back then that were very hot: investment banking, management consulting, and real estate. And I looked at all 3 of those and actually came down between McKinsey and this little firm called LaSalle Partners. And there's something about real estate that got my attention, and that's what I did.
What an incredible story. As you mentioned, the commercial real estate landscape has changed and evolved over your 31 years greatly. What was the first role that you played in the company, and how did you navigate all those changes so successfully?
Well, I was very fortunate. I sort of understood development, and many of you know there are not a lot of development positions in this world. And when I first started interviewing with LaSalle, they said, "You got all this leadership position. We think you ought to run a property. You would be great at that." And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so." And the development opportunity came up. And matter of fact, the guy that I worked most closely with, John Bortz, who is currently the CEO of Pebblebrook Hotel REIT. I guess I'll be a competitor to John now with host on my resume. But in any event, worked very closely with John. And the first project I got, I'm going to tell you, was Manufacturers Hanover Plaza. It's in Wilmington, Delaware. And I was taking the train up there 2 or 3 days a week. And let me tell you, to this day, that was one of the most difficult and complicated structures of a real estate deal I have ever worked with. UPS was our partner on it. And I told my wife, I'd taken capital markets at Harvard and made an E, which is the equivalent of an A in the course, and felt very good about my understanding of finance. But this deal was so complicated. And little did I know that would be the most complicated deal I would ever work on again. But I started in the development area. And the second project I did during that period was 414 Water Street in Baltimore, which was a public-private partnership with the city of Baltimore. And I just loved it. I mean, bringing together the finance, the construction, the planning, the marketing, and the leasing. And those were the two projects. But like everything else, we ran into a recession right around 1990. So all of us that were developers, what did we become? Asset managers. And that's when I went and worked in what is now LaSalle Investment Management, where I was the owner's rep for all of the properties, probably at the time a $700, $800 million portfolio, be about $2 or $3 billion now, included such things as AARP building, Old Ebbitt Grill, that entire building context. I worked with the Carr organization, Oliver Carr.
Okay.
Investments we had with them, I oversaw.
That you probably drive through DC, Baltimore, and know every building, every structure, who bought it, who sold it.
I actually did used to know all of that, Aaron, when I worked mostly in this Baltimore, DC region.
That's awesome. So in your career at JLL, you also started the Public Institutions Business Unit, which is now like 800 people. How did you, like, what brought you to think like this is a business unit that JLL needs to pursue, and how did you evolve that business?
Well, I'm going from development, now I'm in asset management. Our offices were in 800 Connecticut Avenue. I can still visualize it now. And for some of your more mature audiences out there, they may remember something that Vice President Gore headed for the administration. It was called Reinventing Government. And part of that Reinventing Government, the idea was we're going to take public problems and we're going to bring private sector solutioning to those problems. And with that, I'm sitting there, and I've always, I told you about the deal I put together at West Point. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm sitting there saying, there's got to be something. Well, at the same time, JLL had just won the largest facilities outsourcing in Chicago for one of the baby bells. And I had a great idea. I said, great, we can manage properties. I'm going to go over to the GSA and we're going to manage the GSA's properties. And that was my very naive idea. And I started looking at that. And then the more I looked at it at the time, the way the GSA did contracting, you started with 100. And if there was dust, they took away. And that's not a very good way to contract if you want to be a company that wants to have a partnership. So that didn't work out. And the more I looked at it, having been a college professor, I said, boy, there's something with these colleges and universities as well. And I put a business plan together. And I got to tell you, additionally, initially inside JLL, it was like, government, who wants to do government? That's, we do strategy stuff. And long story short, I didn't take no for an answer. And to be honest with you, I went out and got some people in marketing just to print up some flyers. I'd been in the military, as I told you. I started walking the halls in the military. And I had my day job I was doing. And I did all of this, all of you younger people out there. I did all of this on quote unquote my time. And I had a bunch of analysts working for me. And we went out, put a business plan together, got tepid support, I'd say, from LaSalle partners at the time. And then I went out, and before you know it, one of the first deals I won, believe it or not, was what is now the Trump Hotel. From the GSA, we looked at that building. It was an office building, and they wanted to know what is the highest and best use for this building. And my little fledgling group, which was me and 4 analysts, did that analysis, and we came up and said, this ought to be a hotel. Took the GSA about 20 years to get to the point that they finally did that. but that was kind of the start of it. And then the biggest first deal we did were two, actually, working at the University of Pennsylvania. Any of you stayed at the Inn at Penn there, made a relationship with the EVP there. And it was like putting, glue and things together, because I was presenting to the market, hey, we're public institutions and we can help you do this. And luckily made a good connection, got that done. But the really big one was the military housing privatization program, which the Army, we did, billions of deals privatizing Army housing. And of course, a combination of my experience. And by that time, a lot of the people that were my colleagues, matter of fact, one of my classmates from West Point was Secretary of the Army. So we had access to go in and present ourselves. So that's how PI started. And then from there, it's just really rolled. And the current leadership, I'm still partial to it, but I spend my time on a lot of probably more corporate things now, but that will always be my baby.
I have no doubt about that. I was wondering what your involvement was now and how often they leaned on you for consult.
Well, quite a bit. I think it was in the news yesterday, so I can talk about it. I get involved in a lot of big deals. For example, the first outsourcing of a state's real estate, the state of Tennessee. I led the team doing that. We were just announced in the paper, even though the deal's not totally signed yet, but the city of Chicago is outsourcing the Chicago public school system, outsourcing the management of the schools. And I was very involved in that. So I get involved at the strategic level. Fortunately, with all the things I do, I've got a lot of contacts, so I can open a lot of doors. But I enjoy, people ask me something today, do you like fishing? And I make the analogy with fishing and business. I said, fishing's okay, but I like catching. And what I mean by that, I like winning. And so I'm involved in the people that run that business to the extent they need some help on something, I'm there to help. Matter of fact, that's the role I play in the firm anywhere. I just help everybody win.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I think a lot of the network that you've built is based on the impressive amount of public and private boards that you participate in, like the American Red Cross. You also had an appointment with the Obama administration, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that. My question is, what's the most memorable or rewarding advisory role that you've played to date?
Well, let's actually start with the not-for-profit. I have everybody knows to whom much is given, much is expected. And I come from a, somewhat of a meager background, and I'm very happy where I am today. I've got 3 kids, beautiful family. Unfortunately, my wife recently passed away, but she was, the heart of this family, and we just did some great things. And we definitely believe in giving back. And probably the boards that on that avenue that were important, certainly the American Red Cross, I'm one of 12 governors of that. And I'm going to talk about a little while that the more you give, the more you receive. And I'll tell you about that a little later. But then I've been on the West Point Association of Graduates Board for about 20 years, giving back to my alma mater, just really staying in there doing that. And then the board you talked about, my VA, Bob McDonald was the VA secretary, and he's also a West Pointer. He and I actually serve on the West Point board now together. And Bob was the former CEO of Procter & Gamble. Many of you, your listeners may know. And Bob wanted to bring a governance process that was transparent and more similar to what he had from the corporate sector, meaning I want to get present company accepted. I want to get some smart people around me, look at the programs and the operations of the VA and challenge in the appropriate manner and give me ideas to make it better. Now, it's one thing about doing it in the government. All of our board meetings had to be open. These are the open public laws. And anybody could come to the board meetings. But that was number one. Anytime your country asks you to serve and do something, you have to give that serious consideration. And again, I spent 30 years total in the military, so including the reserve time. So that felt very good. And then the opportunity to again serve at that level and have an impact. And one of my boards that probably I spend a lot of time on, I've served on probably 5, 6 public boards, but one I serve on now that I'm very, very happy about is USAA. And you guys hopefully see our commercials all the time. And I've been on that board for about 9 years now. And that one I really like because we are serving those who serve us. And it's a Fortune 100 company, very complicated company, and we are doing great things for our soldiers and their families out there.
Awesome. I have to ask, Herman, how do you find the time to support these boards and engage so heavily with them? They're high profile. And then balancing JLL, which is also a very high performing team. Like, how do you balance everything?
Well, I said I was going to get to that, Aaron, and thanks for asking this question, because believe it or not, first of all, let me give you one of my philosophies on life. And a lot of people believe in networking, and networking is very important. It's something that we need to do. And networking, however, is transactional in nature. Mm-hmm. I do this for you, you're going to do this for me. It's not said, but it's implied that networking. Going back to my years in Alabama, I'm from Alabama. I went to a high school that was 16% African-American. And you're looking at the guy that was the quarterback and the president of student council, okay, in 1970 and early 70s, okay? That wasn't kind of the norm. And that occurred, I think, in retrospect, because I have this philosophy of connecting. And what connecting means is that you do something for someone without regard to what you're going to receive in return. And if you make that part of the foundation of your life, it's amazing what happens, because you build relationships, okay? So I think that's one of the things that has given me the opportunity to do this. Now, let's talk about the time period. I've got a phenomenal assistant, Patricia Washington. She's been with me for over 20 years. So she not only knows me, but she knows all of my customers and clients very well. We work very well together as a team. So that's number one, having the right structure around you. This morning, I read for an hour and a half. So you have to stay, of all the things, I mean, from JLL to real estate to, I'm on a financial services company, I'm now on a hotel company, American Campus Communities, which is a student housing REIT. I got Comfort Systems, which is a HVAC mechanical contractor. I've got a couple of private companies that are in technology, and all of and then I serve on the advisory board for New York State Teachers Retirement System. So these are opportunities to learn. I get a perspective from each of those interactions, which gives me a pretty unique perspective, because as a board member and as a senior executive, what the skill you need is the skill to see around corners, right? And a good board member, what you do as opposed to management is you ask good questions. So I think over this 20 years that I've been doing that, it gives me an opportunity to exercise the mind, learn how to incisively see a situation, come to a conclusion, then using your interpersonal skills to draw the team together and then get success. And this basically complements what I do at JLL, because I'm in the Red Cross meeting. Well, I'm with, the number 3 people at Apple, the number 2 person at Walmart. I'm with the CEO of MasterCard, et cetera. So you're in the room, and then people see you. And guess what? When they come up and say, wow, I got this real estate issue, guess what? They call me. So it's symbiotic to JLL, and JLL has been very, very, very accommodating in terms of, particularly for the role that I have now, that I oversee, for example, Microsoft. I'm the senior executive on that account, and I work with Apple. So these relationships, it is so important for all of us out there marketing. There's one thing to go to the procurement department, but there's another thing to have that C-level relationship so that you can purely articulate what your value proposition is.
Yeah. What really resonated with me, a number of things, the connecting versus network, that's really important, I think, for everyone to think about, whether we're connecting with folks in our industry or outside of our industry. And then the other takeaway I had there, Herman, was the power of being a part of something, a mission that you truly are passionate about and wanting to learn more about. That keeps you engaged, and that keeps, I think, you fulfilled to be able to take on additional things as well.
You nailed it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I was doing a little of my own soul searching. By the way, what time do you go to bed at nighttime?
Lately, it's I tell you, over the years, my wife was an early to bed, early get up because she went to the gym all the time, and I was more of the later to bed. And if I had the opportunity to sleep a little longer, but I want to tell you, let's see, we're in 2020. In 2019, I flew 130,000 miles without an international trip. So I was, up early going to get it. And in the South, we have an old saying, you got to bale the hay while the sun is shining. So you got to get out there and get to work and get things done. So I try now to get at least 6 hours of sleep, but
Okay.
sometimes that doesn't happen.
I believe that, by the way. So you're a part of the B2B project, which fosters appointments of highly qualified women in for non-for-profit boards, publicly traded boards, and bringing diversity to the table. This is an area that I'm really passionate about. And I've heard from Kelly Katz and Jay Farmer, who invited you here today, that you've led a lot of what JLL is doing on the diversity and inclusion efforts. What is your advice on how to drive diversity in the commercial real estate industry?
Well, I am very, very passionate about diversity, and that's both from a gender as well as an ethnicity, and from LGBT, everything. We as a minority myself, I'm sensitive to being left out, being overlooked, being underestimated, and with that, I go back to what I said earlier: to whom much is given, much is expected. And I actually started over 20 something years ago within JLL with this idea that, guys, the more, I didn't know how to articulate it at that time, but it's like, well, I'm doing, particularly when I've got public institutions. Well, the public sector has more diversity in terms of women and African Americans working in organizations. And I was able to get in the door and get certain things. And then I start talking about fraternities. I start talking about something that somebody else from another religion maybe have, and all of a sudden you connect with the people, right? We talked about the connecting going on. And this is an interesting statistic that I'm using now. Between 2035 and 2040, the majority of people in America are going to be people of color. Now take that statistic and you put the women on top of it. Organizations that are not proactively making sure that they have throughout their organization diversity are not going to be as successful. Diverse teams make better decisions. And what does it take for that to happen? Number one, organizations, and this is what I preach in the boardroom. Organizations, number one, take an assessment of where you are. A lot of organizations, and JLL used to be this way, and I was one that just pounded at it. We don't want to put our statistics out there because they don't look good.
Right.
Well, you got to start with transparency. Where are you? And then that's the only way you can say where you want to be. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you have to have senior leadership commitment. And I don't mean just jawboning. A lot of organizations jawbone. Okay, they put a nice bow on the pig and then say, this is it. Okay, then you've got to have some type of goals. Okay, the quota word gets people all upset. We're going to have disqualified, unqualified people. That is not, if you think about it, we have NOI, we have leasing percentage. You've got all these metrics that you manage, all of us on this phone, every month. And we look at those metrics and things aren't going right. We say, hey, what do we need to do? Well, you need metrics around diversity as well. Okay. Then you need to make sure that there's accountability. And what's happening in a lot of the public companies now, we're taking that CEO and saying, okay, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, this is what we want from you. And if you don't get it, we're going to hit you in your pocketbook. Because if it's just a good thing to have, we've seen over 400 years from my history anyway, it's just not going to change. But the idea and what I try to present is present diversity as a business proposition, a business imperative. Not only are you going to feel better, perhaps, okay, but you're going to do better and you're going to make the pie bigger for everybody in your organization.
Yeah. So that statistic that you gave around people of color, 2035, Is there a risk that businesses that aren't investing in this talent now in junior levels of organizations will have missed the boat in 2035? The other companies are going to absorb that talent in a way that you will be left behind.
Well, I want you to just think of, say, Kodak. Okay. If you're not agile, if you don't understand what's around the corner, and as that great philosopher Wayne Gretzky says, you got to skate to where the puck is going to be. So I think organizations that are not forward looking and are not thinking about those demographic changes, they are not going to be as successful. And I even tell my own colleagues, look, I had a team, we were, again, I initiate a lot of new opportunities. And this one client we were going, and I'm on a call, and it was a Zoom screen like this, and I'm looking there, and in the lower right-hand corner, I'm the only black face I see on the screen. And the person and their assistant that we're presenting to are both African-American. And I asked the team, I said, look at the screen. I said, let's think about this. I said, look, the CEO and me, I don't hire people anymore, okay? This is on all of you who are on this call as you're putting your teams together. If you're not cognizant that you're going to need a diverse team to be successful, we're not going to be as successful as we can be.
That's right. So, well, and speaking of diversity, there's also a looming conundrum in our industry around diminishing labor pools for trade resources, particularly on the project side. What are your thoughts about that challenge that we're struggling with in the trade industry, and how do we resolve it in real estate?
Well, you know what? I think it starts particularly for the opportunity in real estate at the trade level as well as the professional level. It starts with an education program, right? Some universities have real estate majors, but they're not a whole bunch of them, right? Real estate is very much a word of mouth, okay? I didn't know this industry existed really until I went to Harvard Business School and saw that it existed. And I was 27, 28 at the time, because my home, we didn't sit around the table and talk about leasing statistics, so you don't know it exists. So I think you're familiar with Europe, okay? Mm-hmm. That's certainly one program that JLL is a sponsor of. I started an organization called African American Real Estate Professionals of Washington, D.C. Did that back in the 80s, okay? Early 90s, I'm sorry. And now there are chapters of that in LA, San Francisco, Boston, Atlanta, New York. And that was my brainchild. And I feel so good about that. Yeah. There's another organization called REAP, Real Estate Apprentice Program, which many of your listeners are probably familiar with. Then we have Real Estate Executive Council, which is a group of Black senior executives in real estate. So all of these organizations, generally they have a mission of informing, recruiting, and most of all, sharing opportunities that exist in this market. So we've got to go out, we've got to educate people on what these opportunities are. And, most people step back and say, well, I had this opening and, these are the people that applied for it. Well, of course, if you want to catch catfish, you don't go to the Pacific Ocean. You go to the Tennessee River. You gotta catch, notice I didn't say fish, you gotta catch in the ponds where the people and the resources you're looking for actually reside.
Yeah, that's right. Herman, I would love to share some of the links to the organizations that you just described to the folks on this phone that can help influence and inform their own organizations to afford these opportunities for internships and continued education in our sector. So I will send you an email with a request to make sure I've got them right for our audience here.
Okay, we'll do that.
I knew this 30 minutes would go by too quick, Herman. We're so grateful that you spent some time with us today, and I've just adored getting to know you. You're a lovely guy, and I look forward to learning more about you in the future and catching up later.
Well, that is great. Well, look, I want to commend you and CoreNet for, first of all, having the program. Secondly, in terms of the leadership, Jay did a great job, but I think you and Kelly really pushed it. Okay, so let's get the woman power out there. And, these subjects do not have to be uncomfortable conversations. However, we need to talk about these things. Then we need to get a common goal, a common objective, and let's work together and make the world better for everyone.
I agree. I love it. I'm with you. Thank you, Herman. Thank you to everyone listening today. Check out our website for all the upcoming events that we have. We look forward to sharing some in-person time, hopefully in the fall. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of the week. Thank you. See you, Herman.
Bye-bye.
Bye.